Okay, so last night we imagined and evoked the scene at Lhasa of King Trisondetson, 500 soldiers, family members, ministers, politicians, members of the public, all eagerly awaiting the arrival of Padmasambhava. Padmasambhava had been entreated, had been invited to come, and it had taken some time. He hadn't come straight away. He'd taken his time to arrive. The king had been impatient and sent emissaries asking Padmasambhava to come soon. And today was the day. Today, Padmasambhava would finally arrive in Tibet. So the crowd is eager, they're anticipating the arrival of Padmasambhava. And so that's where we'll start. That's where we'll start this morning, with the arrival of Padmasambhava in Tibet. So we heard yesterday as well of Sangharakshita Urgyen Sangharakshita's first encounter with Padmasambhava. In fact, it described it as something he felt actually a familiar presence that had always been there, but the first time of seeing the image. And we've got this wonderful shrine room with wonderful images of Padmasambhava. So I just want to evoke the appearance of Padmasambhava to start with, and maybe if you can see these images, just take them in, have a look at them. There's one above the entrance to the shrine room and this larger one here on the wall. So Padmasambhava is a monk at Nalanda University. He's also a tantric guru, the Vajra guru, he wields a Vajra in his right hand. So this is a puny Vajra compared to the one on the shrine. We've got a massive Vajra on the shrine, but this is one I have at home in Sheffield. And this is the demon subduing gesture that Padmasambhava holds the Vajra in his right hand. In his left hand, he holds a skull cup bubbling with nectar, red nectar. So it's a human skull cup in his left hand. And then in the crook of his left arm, there's a flaming trident, three-pronged trident. On the top, toward the top of the trident are three severed heads. There's a freshly severed head, a rotting head, and a skull. And the whole thing is on fire, just flames surrounding the trident in the crook of his left arm. And he wears three different robes. So the outer robe is a robe of the monk, the kind of saffron yellow robe of the monk. He has an inner robe of the tantric guru, a blue robe symbolising the tantra, and he wears a red cloak of a bodhisattva, the Mahayana tradition. And then he wears a cap, and in the peak of his cap is a vulture's feather. And perhaps one of the most fascinating things about Padmasambhava is his gaze. He looks at us. It's not clear whether he's frowning or smiling or both. He's got a kind of a furrowed brow, and it's almost like an ecstatic glare, a wrathful smile it's sometimes called. So quite a challenging appearance. I mean, there's the figure himself just full of symbolism. Just some of the things I've mentioned, you could spend the whole weekend exploring these symbols. So the figure of Padmasambhava himself, he's highly symbolic and quite a challenging, certainly arresting appearance. And I've seen that the people in Tibet, I'm sure they were curious, and they would have been slightly scared to meet Padmasambhava for the first time, this really challenging figure that they would have heard so much about, was travelled from India. And they all expected what would happen would be that when he met the king, he would bow to the king. This is what happens. You come to the king's the most powerful man in Tibet. You bow to the king. And that's what the king is expecting as well. He's standing there waiting for Padmasambhava to bow to him. But I'll just read you from a passage from this section of the life and liberation of Padmasambhava. This king, this is Padmasambhava reflecting, this king of defiled Tibet is great through his paternal lineage. But who are we, he and I? Plunged in darkness is his mind. I am learned in the 5 realms of knowledge, Buddha in a single lifetime, exempt from birth and death. It is out of necessity that he invites me here. Formerly the king bowed down before me. Shall I or shall I not return his bow? If yes, the majesty of the doctrine will be slighted. If no, since he is the king, he will be angered. Yet, however great he be, bow down I cannot. And King Trisandetson thought to himself, I am sovereign over all the blackheads of Tibet. The Bodhisattva abbot has already made obeisance to me. The guru must prostrate himself as well. So loath to extend his first greeting, he stood there hesitant. So there's this standoff, the king waiting for Padmasambhava to bow to him, and Padmasambhava unable to bow, refusing to bow because he doesn't want to slight, he cannot slight the Dharma. And this is a highly symbolic episode in this story. Yeah, I think it's worth reflecting as we start this, as I start this talk and we start this weekend. What is our motive? What is our motivation? And are we really willing to serve the Dharma? What is it that we are serving? So the king has arrived and he's invited Padmasambhava, so he wants Padmasambhava's help. But in a way, his life it isn't about the Dharma, it's about power, it's about wealth, and it's symbolised by all of the things gathered around him, his wives, his family, his ministers, all of that entourage. And what is it that he's really serving? And in a way, he's expecting Padmasambhava to bow to him, to serve him. And Padmasambhava won't do that. Padmasambhava won't bow and serve the king. The king needs to bow to Padmasambhava. The king needs to serve Padmasambhava. And listening to Padmabhadra gave a series of talks on Padmasambhava, which are really worth listening to, available on YouTube. And drawing out the symbolism of this encounter, Padmabhadra says, well, usually we identify with Padmasambhava and we kind of think the king is very foolish. Look at the foolish king, unable to bow to Padmasambhava. But really, we are the king, that's us. We are King Trisandetson. We're kind of embarking on the Dharma life, but we just need to ask ourselves, what is it that we really serve? What is it that we go for refuge to? Are we really willing to serve the Dharma, to go for refuge to it? And that's, in a way, a good starting point for the story and for our Dharma life. And the Dharma life, really, the answer is, of course, we're not able to arrive at the Dharma life without all of the other things in our life, all the other things that we serve, all the other things that we go for refuge to. Like the king, we arrive wanting to meet Padmasambhava, but bringing all of this stuff with us. And the Dharma life it's a process of purification. We're purifying, deepening our going for refuge, what it is that we serve, getting that more and more clear, more and more that we serve the 3 jewels. We go for refuge to the 3 jewels. But to begin with, we're like the king. We just arrive unable to do that, and with all of our baggage, all the other things that we serve in our life. And in a way, we brought that to Padmaloka with us. We've arrived at Padmaloka with our minds, our hearts full of all this other stuff in our lives. So, we'll hear more about this in this evening's ritual. We're going to hear this full story read out this evening. But just to give you a kind of overview, what happens next is that Padmasambhava sings a song, or there's a great exclamation. It's like a song. He describes to the king who he is. He talks about who he is and why he can't serve the king, why he won't bow down to the king. So he talks about, I am the Buddha, Padmasambhava. I am Padmasambhava, the Dharma, the holy doctrine. I am Padmasambhava, the sorcerer. I am Padmasambhava, the old man. I am Padmasambhava, the young man. It goes through all these different ways of describing who he is. In a way, what becomes clear, you can't really pin Padmasambhava down. You can't really understand him. He just describes all these different forms that he is, all these different aspects of Padmasambhava. And then flames come out of his fingertips. And the king, it said like a sigh, the king and all the soldiers, everybody there just bow, just prostrate themselves. Like it says they're cut down as if like a scythe cutting down head. They just all bow down to Padmasambhava, they just can't help but prostrate before him. So I think I wanted to start there just by naming, well, that is the situation of our Dharma life. We want to go for refuge to the three jewels, but we also feel like we need the protection of all these other things. We can't go alone to meet the Dharma, to go for refuge to the Dharma. But the Dharma life is a process of purification of our motive. Okay, and I think I want to name something as well, which is that I found it difficult to come up with a structure for this talk or to even write this talk. And there's lots of things I want to say, like Diana was saying, there are lots of things I want to share with you, but it's difficult to decide, well, what's the appropriate structure for this talk? And so I'm kind of arriving slightly naked without a kind of formal structure, but what I would like to do is tell the story of what happened, the Padmasambhava helping the King of Tibet, and the structure, and just to, anyway, make a commentary on this, give a commentary, draw out some reflections, some of my own experiences, some of my own thoughts in response to the symbolism. But also make it clear, well, a story like this and symbols like this, there isn't a correct answer. There isn't an easy response. It means this, it means that. You could think for yourself, reflect for yourself. What does it evoke for you? And you could talk about this in the groups. What does the story, what does the symbolism, what does the myth evoke for you? So I want to go back to the start of this episode, the start of the story. So the King of Tibet, Trisomdetsen, he's got a very noble aspiration. He wants to make Tibet a country of the Dharma. He wants to establish the Dharma in Tibet. It's described as a barbarian country, just a land without morals, without ethics, without it needs the Dharma. It needs the Dharma, and the king wants to establish the Dharma in Tibet. So an ethical ruler, a noble ruler, and he invites a monk from Nalanda University, not Padmasambhava initially, a different monk called Shantarakshita. The abbot Shantarakshita, who's very learned and very ethical, very noble monk, and he travels over to Tibet and he conducts rituals, and they begin the construction of the monastery at Samye. They want to build a great monastery. And something very strange and mysterious happens, because they, having performed the ritual, started work, built the foundations and the first walls of the monastery, when the workers return the next day, it's as though nothing has happened. All of the stones have been returned, all of the earth has been returned back to its original place. And it's as if nothing has taken place. And they're confounded by this, they're really confused, and they just do the same thing again. They build the walls, they can start to construct the monastery. And then they come back the next day and the same thing has happened. It's as if nothing has taken place. All of the stones, all of the earth are back where they originally were. This goes on. And eventually, Shantarakshita, the abbot, says to the king, "We can't build a monastery. I can't handle this in a way like this. I can't help you. I thought we could, but we can't do this." And the stories say, the stories in the life and liberation of Padmasambhava say that the location where they decided to build the monastery at Samye was on top of a rose bush that was sacred to Nagas. And the Nagas called upon, they stirred up the deities and got them to obstruct the building of the monastery. So there was, by day, the men were constructing the monastery, and at night time, in darkness, the local deities, spirits, yakshas, kind of guided by the Nagas, were just pulling down the walls and obstructing the construction of the monastery. So, the abbot said, "I can't help you, I can't do this, but what you need is Padmasambhava. You need to call on Padmasambhava. He's the only person who can help you to establish the Dharma in Tibet, who can tackle these forces, these energies." So, an invitation is sent to Padmasambhava over in India, and Padmasambhava accepts the invitation, and but then he doesn't come initially. he doesn't come straight away. He goes to Nepal and starts the journey through the mountains and the valleys of Nepal, just gradually makes his way to Tibet. And the king sends more messengers, more emissaries, and he brings gifts of gold and jewels. And when they arrive at Padmasambhava, it said he takes the gold and just throws it to the far reaches of Nepal. He just throws it away. He doesn't want the gold. He's not interested in the gold. But he sees that the messengers are disturbed by this and upset, so he takes soil and earth, puts it in their cloaks, and when they open it, it's transformed into jewels and gold. And he says to them, when you go back to Tibet, I'm going to make my way to Tibet, but first of all, I need to tame the demons of Tibet and Nepal. And he travels through the mountains and the valleys of Tibet and Nepal, and you get these amazing descriptions of Padmasambhava facing down, battling, overcoming these demons of Nepal and Tibet. And I didn't have a copy printed off, but from memory, there's they have these amazing names. There's like the Lady of the White Lake, and they throw glaciers at Padmasambhava. Sometimes they throw fire at him. Sometimes he hurls them into a lake which boils their flesh. Sometimes he grabs them in a gesture of a hook in the nostrils. Basically, they throw everything they've got at Padmasambhava, but they can't harm him. And eventually, they yield. One by one, these deities, these forces yield. And he said each time they give the heart of their lives to Padmasambhava, and he entrusts with them a great teaching to protect. Each one of them becomes a protector of a great teaching. Sometimes as well, he gives them a new name. So there's one, the Lady of the Lake becomes the Vajra Lady of Turquoise. He gives them mysterious new names. But all of them become protectors of the Dharma. He gives them a teaching to protect. Then Padmasambhava arrives in Lhasa. He has this encounter with the king. There's this standoff. The king prostrates himself eventually before Padmasambhava. And Padmasambhava, he begins the construction of the monastery again. They begin constructing the monastery. And by day, the men construct the monastery. And by night, it said, all kinds of beings get involved. It said, like the gods, Brahmin, other gods, they get involved in getting the clay ready. There's yakshas, all kinds of strange deities and forces. They're building the monastery at night. It said that the monastery gets built twice as fast in the evening, and in the daytime, the men are building the monastery. It's even said that they run out of resources, and Padmasambhava then negotiates with the king of the Nagas, and the king of the Nagas, it said after 2 days, this great tail of a serpent shakes the surface of a lake, and gold is washed up against the shores, and the people gather that together and buy the resources they need to complete the monastery. So that's the tale. That's the story of the founding of Tibet, the Dharma in Tibet, and the building of Samye Monastery. And it's quite a strange tale, isn't it? I don't know if you've never encountered that before. Like what on earth to make of that story? What can we learn from that? What can we take from that? So I want to just take sections of the story and just explore them, unpack them, just throw some ideas and some experiences of mine, and just see. You can, in your groups, you can explore for yourselves what might be being communicated by this story, by these strange events. So maybe, I don't know about you, but I can relate to the symbolism of this. So, I've, in my life, committed myself to the Dharma. I've become an order member, I've committed myself to the Dharma. Prior to that, I became a Mitra. I wanted to make a commitment to the 3 jewels. Prior to that, I made a commitment to meditate every day. Prior to that, I made a commitment to live a more ethical life. And I have these really noble aspirations. I make these commitments, really, really meaning them, with real integrity and sincerity. But then it seems that there are times it feels like the work gets undone. There are kind of forces maybe within me that are opposed to this commitment that I've made. Sometimes it can feel like everything's been undone, nothing's happened, no progress has been made. All of the earth, all of the stones are back where they were to begin with. And yeah, sometimes it can feel like that. Well, where am I? I'm back where I was 5 years ago, or 2 years ago, or 3 months ago, doing the same things with the same views, the same habits, the same behaviour. Has anything changed? Is anything? Where's the progress? And that must be what the King of Tibet felt like. Where's the progress? Why is this not happening? And what is it that's opposed to this great kind of noble aspiration of founding the Dharma in Tibet? And I think one of the dangers, and maybe it's an inevitable danger, an inevitable fact at the start of the Dharma life, is we don't really know ourselves. There are bits of ourselves that we're blind to, that we're cut off from, that we're alienated from. That's, I think, one aspect of this story. I think it's significant that this takes place in the dark of night, where the king is not, the monk, they're not aware of what's taking place. It happens in the darkness. And there are bits of us that we identify with, that we think are ourselves, that, like Diane Arthur called me a good man, and, to an extent I am a good man, and we have this identity. I'm a good man, or I'm a nice Buddhist man, a good Buddhist. But there's all these different parts of us, these different energies, these different forces that we're unaware of, that we're blind to, that it's as though they're in the darkness, that we don't identify with them, and we're not aware of them. And to the extent that our idea of who we are and what the Dharma life is excludes those bits of us, they're going to sabotage it. They're not going to allow the Dharma to be built without excluding them. I think this is one way we can interpret this, or I interpret this. It's certainly related to my experience. So just to give an account of this. Well, I guess my idea of myself when I became a Buddhist was that I was a nice person, a nice Buddhist, and that I didn't really get angry. That was something this is an idea about myself that I had at the time. And then I started to meditate, and I started to commit more and more to the Dharma life. And it's around the time of my ordination. And particularly at my ordination, I can remember being given the sadhana of Amitabha, who's the Buddha of loving kindness and warmth and goodwill, and sitting down to do the meditation. And the first couple of days I did it, it was just amazing. It was really blissful, and really felt Amitabha being alive and in touch with warmth and loving kindness. And then the third day I sat down to do it, I was filled with rage and anger, and it was directed towards my private preceptor who just ordained me. I was completely thrown by this and frightened by this. It's like, well, what on earth is going on? This isn't what's supposed to happen. This isn't what, I'm sitting down to develop loving kindness, and what I'm experiencing is hatred and rage towards my private preceptor, who's just given me this great gift of ordination in his name. What on earth? And I didn't feel like I could talk to my private preceptor about it, unfortunately, but I was with Satyaraja, who was leading the retreat, and he was in a kind of small group with me and my preceptor. And I was able to go for a walk with him, and I remember him saying to me, this is a good thing that's happening. You need this energy, and you're much bigger than you think you are. You're a much bigger person than you think you are. And this energy, you need it. But it's being expressed in this way because it's been squashed, it's been blocked down for such a long time. It's coming out in this destructive form. But actually, you're bigger than you think you are, and you need this energy. So that was a relief, because I just assumed something disastrous was. I was just very confused and didn't know what was going on. And then I had to work out what to do with that energy, how to. It's interesting in the story of Padmasambhava, the demons they're not destroyed, they're not kind of banished to hell, or they're not, they're the symbolism of the Tantra and of the story is that all of the energy is needed for the Dharma life. All of our energy needs to be included in awakening, enlightenment. We can't become awakened without all of us involved, and that energy needs to be harnessed and it needs to be used for the Dharma to help to build the Dharma. So I had to figure out what that looked like. I might talk more about that in a little while. So the first thing that Padmasambhava does is he uses the magic of naming, the power of naming. And names have a power. They have a power in Tantric Buddhism, but also in Western literature and in West, in magic. So there's if you know somebody's true name, or if you know something's name, it can no longer have the same power over you. And this is, if you read Harry Potter, I've not read all of it, but apparently this occurs in Harry Potter. It occurs in Tantric Buddhism. It's also there's a great novel I read called The Wizard of Earthsea, and there is a character, the main character is a wizard, or trainee wizard, and his name is Ged, or Sparrowhawk. His true name is Ged, and he's very careful, he can't tell many people his true name because that gives them power over him. But he's quite an arrogant young man, and basically he acts in a way that's unskillful and unleashes this kind of, almost like this demonic presence, which then haunts him. And whilst he's in the kind of protected walls of the wizard school, this great school, he can't be harmed, but eventually he has to leave, and this presence, this kind of demonic presence, follows him and haunts him. And he spends his life in fear of it, kind of turning away from it. And there comes a crucial turning point in the novel where he just decides to turn directions, turn towards it, and almost become the pursuer. So he starts to pursue this force rather than having it pursue him. And the strangest thing happens, it turns away and starts to run away from him. And it gets small, it starts to shrink as well, rather than being this huge demonic presence, it starts to shrink. And the more, he can't quite get close to it, but the more he goes after it, it starts to shrink. And eventually they reach the kind of outer peripheries of their world in the oceans and the sea, and he gets closer to it. And then he says that he knows now the true name of this presence. And he says its true name, and at the same time it says the same word, Ged, but he names it as himself. And they become unified and no longer separated. I think this is very, very powerful symbolism. There are bits of us that we fear, that we don't want to identify with. They don't fit in with our idea of being a nice Buddhist or a good man. And so we become, we kind of repress them, we ignore them, we edit them out of our experience. And there could be things that are socially unacceptable, but not actually unethical. They could be just really actually unskillful traits that we don't want to identify with. We don't want to admit to ourselves the kind of how unskillful we are, so we deny that to ourselves. Sometimes it can be what's best in us, what's best in us frightens us, and we exclude that as well because that is too threatening. We cut that out, we exclude that from our identity of ourselves, but it all just gets kind of closed into this, this kind of archetypal basement. It kind of just gets kind of locked there. And maybe some people can live their lives kind of with that basement kind of locked and back turned to it. But when you start to commit to something, and when you start to meditate, and when you start to live a Dharma life, sooner or later, you have to turn and face and name these different parts of ourselves. We need to bring them into awareness. And Padmasambhava has one of his tools, one of his weapons, is a purva. So this is one I borrowed from Sheffield Buddhist Centre. It's a fantastic purva, sometimes called a demon dagger. It's got a very sharp point. It's got Garuda mouths here. It's got different faces at the top and an animal head, a horse's head at the top. And the purva, sometimes called the demon dagger, Padmasambhava uses to pin down demons. This is partly how he subdues them, how he battles with them, how he transforms them. The first thing he needs to do is pin them down. They're no longer, when they're pinned down, they can no longer have the same power. And this is a symbol for me of that piercing pinpoint of awareness. And when we bring energies, views, behaviour out of the darkness into the light of awareness, we can start to see it more clearly, and we can name it. We can name this is what it is. We can name it to ourselves, we can name it to our friends, and accept it as part of ourselves, this behaviour, this view, take ownership of it, take responsibility for it. This is me that's behaving in this way, these are my views, I need to take ownership of them. But when we do that, when we start to see them more and more clearly and name them, it's as though they're being pinned down, they're no longer in control of us, we're no longer in the grip of this demon, whether it's a view, a behaviour, an emotion, an energy, we're no longer in its grip, and we can start to have a really good look at it. And that's the beginning of starting to get into a different relationship with it and starting to transform it. Careful with the paper. Yeah. And to the extent that we're not including bits of ourselves, whether it's those bits will sabotage our Dharma life. That's my experience, and sometimes for very good reasons, like the way that our idea about the Dharma life, the way that we're trying to live it, is completely wrong, and it's excluding. It doesn't include the best of us and who we really are. And to the extent we're doing that, it will become sabotaged. And the more we ignore these different parts within us, what's best in us, the more they will kind of bang, the more loudly they will bang, the more disruptive they will become. So the first thing we need to do is to bring awareness to the situation, become more and more aware of our inner world through meditation. We need to name what's going on, name whether it's a view, an ethical pattern, a behaviour. So confession becomes important. We can confess what's going on in our lives, our ethical lives, to other people. Start to own up to it, start to admit to it, start to take responsibility for it. And my experience was that I was very, very scared of being seen by other people. I was really frightened of people knowing what I was really like. I didn't really want to know myself what I was really like. Certainly didn't want other people to know. But I just had this fear that I was not a good man, that there'd be something about me that I couldn't really reveal to other people. My experience is the more and more honest I became, the more and more open I became, the more I kind of revealed myself to other people. The more it kind of shrank, the less frightened I became of it, and I could just accept it. Well, this is who I am. This is where I'm at, and then it can begin to be transformed. So there's a real power in naming to other people as well as to yourself. This is what's going on for me. These are my ethical shortcomings, and then there's a power in them really taking that seriously, not letting you off the hook, but also. Often you discover, well, everybody else has the same demons, everybody else has the same unethical patterns, and when you can start to share that with others, you can trust each other. That there's a power in that; it can be transformed. Yeah, so I think anger was one of the demons that I had to encounter. And one of the things I needed to do was just meet it in meditation. It started to present itself initially in meditation, as I described in my sadhana. I just sit there, and I didn't really have any other choice, just for kind of 30 minutes, 40 minutes, the whole length of the sadhana. There was just like this rage burning through my body. Initially, I identified it with rage, but really what it was like an energy, quite a powerful energy, just kind of surging through me. And I just needed to allow it to be there in meditation and just kind of sit with it. I don't think it's something you can really make happen in meditation, but sometimes we can be trying to do the meditation on top of what's actually there, like we're trying to build a monastery on top of what's there. And sometimes we need to if there's something that needs to be attended to, just allow it to be there and to experience it. That's what I needed to do initially with the anger. And I tried to find out like what more information about this. How do you work with anger? There wasn't a lot of information I could find, but I remember in a seminar Sangharakshita's, it was a chapter of the snake from the Sutta Nipata, and he talks about what to do with a very strong emotion that's already arisen, and he talked about what to do with anger that's already arisen. He said, when it's already arisen, what do you do in that situation? He talked about this kind of alienation we can get into where we're not really allowing or admitting to ourselves what's going on. The beginning point is allowing it to be there. And so he describes living in a community with other people. Sometimes we need to just allow people to be with whatever's going on. And he talked about a Victorian thinker called Herbert Spencer, who would wear a woolen suit. And whenever he wore his woolen suit and came downstairs, his family would know he wasn't in a good mood, he was in a grumpy mood, and then he'd just give him some space. And Sangharakshita suggested, well, maybe in a seminar, maybe we need to do that to each other, just give each other some space sometimes, just kind of allow whatever's going on to be going on. And that can sound like a risky thing to do. In a way, we're starting to kind of face up to our inner demons, not repress it anymore, but face up to it and own it and feel it, like almost like burn with it. But then also, if we're going to do that, we need to have very secure boundaries in place. And I think this is why ethics is so important. Our ethics need to be really, really sharp so that other people aren't going to be harmed by our demons, that, where they're being contained. And in our ritual this evening, you'll see we'll have a very special container, a very clearly defined container for our demons. And the 5 precepts give us this. If we're making sure our anger isn't going to be expressed to other people, it's not going to be acted out. But in a way, the more we are owning up and taking responsibility, the less likely we're going to be blindly lashing out with it, acting it out. But the precepts give us that kind of very safe boundary where we're going to contain it and not harm other people. And if you're really committed to the precepts, it gives you some license to free up your inner world a bit and just see, well, what is there? So that was one kind of form of a demon that I had to tackle. About a year after ordination, I remember again through sadhana, I received the Padmasambhava sadhana from Padmasambhava in Sheffield, and it was about the same kind of date. There's this kind of seems to be this coincidence around the dates. It was around the same kind of time, the end of October, 2012, and shortly after that, I don't think it was a coincidence. Shortly after that, in my life, there just erupted this destructive energy. It seemed like a destructive energy, just. In my first year of working at the centre team with very senior order members, I remember Padmasambhava just saying, well, just take in what's happening, kind of, just go along with what's happening, just get used to being on the centre team. So for about the first year, I just kind of agreed with everything and said yes to everything that was happening. But in the second year, after I started to do this sadhana a little while, something clicked within me, and I just started to say no to everything. And it was really challenging for the people I was working with. They were very good about it. I think it was very difficult for them, but I just had to say no to everything. I just started to disagree with everything and say no to everything. In a way, just to push back, and it was very confusing again. It must have been very difficult. I almost had to stop working at the centre because it was very challenging. At the same time, I was angry as well. I thought I was defiant. I thought I was completely justified to say no to everything. But once I started to really look at it again, just really look at what was going on, talk about it, confess it, just name it, what became clear was, for me, at a certain level, my whole life had been just saying yes to things, trying to be a good boy, trying to please people. And there came a point where I just had to stop doing that. Something kind of burst out and said, no, you can't do this anymore. You can't live your life to please other people or have them approve you. And it also became a start of me really finding a voice, finding what do I really think about things, and being able to give expression to that. Initially, I did that in quite a messy way that wasn't very skillful, but over time I learned to be able to speak out and to say what I really thought, to say no. And also just to look at the other areas of my life where I was just trying to, in a way, be socially acceptable. I think this still needs working out in me. To what extent am I trying to live a socially acceptable life where I get approval and people like me? And that isn't really what the Dharma is about, and it isn't what reality is about, and it's not who I am. So that needs to be destroyed, that needs to be pulled down, that whole approach to life needed to be destroyed. And it was very painful and confusing, but I'm glad that it was, that idea of myself got destroyed, got kind of pulled down by my kind of inner forces. Yeah, there's a, and again, another, well, this isn't a seminar, but a talk that got turned into a book about the art of religion by Samye. There's a little motif, there's a little verse, a little line in there where he talks about emotions again and creativity. It's the importance of having creative outlet for our emotions, and but just saying, if we're not doing that, if we don't have a creative outlet for emotions and our emotions aren't included in our life, he likens them to Cinderella. He said, well, if Cinderella isn't invited to the ball, she's not just going to stay quietly at home and sweep the floor, she'll burn the house down, is what Samye said. So if our emotions aren't invited to the ball, if our inner world, if the best of us, if our creative elements, they're not given an outlet and they're not expressed, if we're not included in our lives and our Dharma life, they'll burn the house down in a way that they won't let us get away with. That's been my experience on different occasions. I think that's one way that I've encountered demons, these very kind of destructive forces or energies that frighten me, that through talking to people and looking at them, I could see more about what needs to happen, what needs to change in my life and my idea of myself. Yeah, and then there's other demons which are just downright unskillful, almost kind of evil behaviours and views which we need to destroy. They need to be destroyed. And maybe the ritual this evening will help us with some of that, just naming, confessing some of the really unskillful, just owning up to ourselves, admitting some of that kind of black evil kind of behaviour, volitions, ideas, views. They need to be purged. We need to be purified of that. Sometimes through ethical work, sometimes through confession with friends, sometimes through calling on the help of Padmasambhava or deity through ritual, through Vajrasattva mantra and ritual. We have to purify these things. And an image came to mind last night and this morning from the Lord of the Rings, and it's the great king of Gondor. And when the kind of fellowship go to meet him and ask for help, he's just kind of sat, he's not even able to communicate, just kind of almost gone to sleep and kind of withered and pale and weak. And just behind him, whispering in his ear, is Wormtongue, who's a kind of servant of Sauron, just whispering kind of evil incantations and doubt and cynicism and negativity into the ear of the king. And all of his power is gone, he's just kind of asleep, unable to operate. And then Gandalf kind of, can't remember exactly what happens, but this is what I'm happening now, could be what happened. There's his staff with light kind of blazing from it, just kind of shines forth, and Wormtongue has to kind of cower away, has to scarp away, and Gandalf whispers an incantation, magic into the ear of the king to liberate him from this, and suddenly the colour comes back and the power, the strength comes back, and he becomes a completely different character. So sometimes our energy is kind of trapped in hideous forms, in ugly forms. It's kind of trapped in unskillful behaviour, and we need to purify that and liberate our energy so it's free to flow and be expressed in skillful, creative forms. So maybe we need Padmasambhava to help us do that, but we need to do the work as well to really transform ourselves and name this, confess this. Okay, and then Padmasambhava, as I said before, it doesn't destroy the gods, like maybe in other, I'm thinking of Christianity really, that way you get the devil banished to hell. And yeah, those kind of myths. For me, maybe that's why I ended up feeling like I needed to just not identify with and kind of banish and exclude the bits of me. But really, like I wasn't taking responsibility for myself, and we need to take ownership. We need to admit to ourselves who we really are, and that includes the best in us as well. Really, really admit to, like, not be frightened by our potential, who we really are. And Padmasambhava, he harnesses, after like facing down the deities, they offer the heart of their lives to him. He entrusts a teaching to them. They become protectors of the Dharma. Rather than these forces opposed to the Dharma, they become protectors of the Dharma. And then all the forces, all of the gods, all of the deities get involved in the construction of the monastery. They aid, they lend their support, and they help to build the monastery. And that's what we want to eventually end up with, all of our energies in service of the Dharma. That's the end point, that's the goal, have all of our energies, all of them in service of the Dharma. And I think, how do we do that? Well, I think there's two things to say. One is, it's important we really look at what we serve. What is it that we are serving? What is it that we're going for refuge to? And we come back to this encounter between Padmasambhava and the king. And to the extent that we're not serving what's best in us and what's highest in us in the universe, some of our energies will be asleep like the king of Gondor, or they'll be poisoned with demonic forms. The more we can commit our lives to something beautiful and noble, the more attractive that's going to be for our deeper energies to get behind, the more they're going to want to serve that. In Vasantra's book about meeting the Buddhas, he has this metaphor of a kind of deep cavern in our depths, like a basement in our depths, and it's got all these great archetypal figures, but they're covered in cobwebs and they're fast asleep. And every now and then he says, one of them looks up and asks, well, what's Bodhinaga doing at the moment? And that again, that's really dull, that's really boring, and they go back to sleep again. So it's if we're doing something really dull and boring with our lives, we're not going to really tap into, we're not going to meet our energies, our true potential. But when we really commit to something beyond us, something noble, something beautiful, then we kind of meet our energies. I mean, it's significant at ordination. I met that energy. When you really commit to something, and then then you've got to use that energy in service of the Dharma. And for me, with my anger, what became clear was I needed to. Prior to that, I was cut off from what I really thought about. I didn't really know what I thought. I didn't have an opinion about things. And it's because I didn't want to offend people. I didn't want to upset people. So I just pretended I didn't have an opinion about anything. And then eventually I just didn't know what I thought. And I became so cut off from my own voice. I didn't really know what I thought about things. And I needed to, once this anger and this energy started to rise, it became clear I really did care about things. This is maybe the kind of a positive form of this energy. I became clear I really cared about things, and I had things to say, and I needed to give expression to that. And once I started to do that, the kind of energy calmed down and settled down. I became able to quite strongly act as a protector for the things I cared about and say, no, that's not. We can't do that. That's going to harm the Dharma or the Sangha. We can't do that. So to be able to speak out straightforwardly but strongly to protect things, so we can that. In the Tantra has these wrathful figures. We've got wrathful Vajrapani in one corner of the shrine room. We've got another protector figure over there. When you look at them, they look demonic and terrifying. They're surrounded by flames. They're powerful. They're in kind of an aggressive posture, about to smack something, destroy it. Wreathed in flames with skulls around them. Great kind of ferocious figures. And that energy is included. They're enlightened beings. That's an enlightened form of Vajrapani and Achala Fudu, thank you. Yeah, the protector figure. So the Tantra includes this energy, which could be aggressive, violent, destructive, becomes aggressive and destructive in service of what's highest, protecting that. So Padmasambhava gives a treasure to the Dharma to each of these deities, and they're protecting the Dharma. And I needed to do that. I needed to become a protector of what was valuable to myself and speak out against that. So that's maybe something to discuss. Is there a place for aggression and anger in the Dharma? How does that fit in? How do you challenge that? Because for men, a lot of us, some of us won't, maybe not, but some of us will have these kind of energies. How do you include that in the Dharma life? Another one maybe to name has been lust. What do you do with lust in the Dharma life? It can seem quite ugly at times, the craving and the behaviour. But what's really involved in that? The desire for beauty for me, perhaps. Pleasure. Where can we find those things? Beauty, pleasure in the Dharma life. So there are things maybe to talk about, to explore. More recently, I've been tackling a demon of doubt and low self-esteem. Kind of the last few months, this sense of a real doubt in myself, and that's quite a poisonous demon. Like this, a sense that I'm not worthy, that I don't. Yeah, it's hard to articulate, but it may be common to other people as well. Kind of, I remember feeling like I dealt with that, tackled that earlier on in my Dharma life, and then suddenly the last few months it's resurfaced again. It's very powerful, convincing, like a worm tongue type demon whispering in my ear about how I might not be able to do this, I might not be able to handle this, and yeah, so just doubt and lack of self-esteem. So that's a demon really like Gandalf to take the stick to, and yeah, we need to correct those stories. If we have those stories, correct those, and really examine them and rid ourselves of them. So yeah, so the last thing Padmasambhava does is this is quite a crude way of talking about it, but it's the best way I can think of it. He gives them a new job. He gives the demons a new job in a way. It's like I don't know. This isn't an appropriate analogy either, but like the gangster that becomes a doorman or something like that. It's like someone who's like they get a new job in service, protecting the Dharma. And what are these demons, when you get to look at them, when you pin them down, what is the job that they need to be doing to protect the Dharma, to serve the Dharma? What's the creative use of them? And again, there's the power of naming. We can often what it is we don't see what's best in us. We can't see it. We're blind to that because maybe we're frightened of it. We're blind to it, and we don't see it. We need friends and preceptors, gurus to name what's best in us. So I'll read this out. There's a lady called Marianne Williamson is associated with this quote, which Nelson Mandela read out one time. And she wrote, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others." So, yeah, it's what's best in us that frightens us the most, and it's our friends who can help us to shine. And one of the things that's really powerful about naming is we can name what's best in other people. Perhaps they're scared of it, perhaps they can't see it, but you can name it. We can rejoice in them. We can rejoice in their merits. We can tell them what's best about them, and that makes it strong. That gives them a new identity, a new way of seeing themselves, a new way of being. It makes that more powerful. So there's a real power in naming in a different way. We can name what's best in other people. And my preceptor, Moga Vangsal, he gave me this name, which I'll maybe talk about in a second. But when I was a Mitra, when I met with him, he could see how much I doubted myself and kind of loathed myself at times. And he would just say to me, "You're a good man." And he would say that over and over again, like Diane Arthur said to me in my introduction, you're a good man. And I just would try whatever I could to not take that in and to avoid that and to kind of let it go past me. And then I remember one time he just grabbing me by the shoulders and like looking at me saying, "You're a good man." So I couldn't ignore it. I had to take that in. So that is, and then at some point I remember thinking, "Oh yeah, well, my idea of myself is just really faulty. I can't trust that. I have to trust other people's view of myself because it's more, they see me. It's in darkness. It's in darkness. I can't see my potential. I can't see the best in me, but my friends can, and they name that and draw that out." So yeah, when I became a Mitra and made that commitment, somebody rejoiced in me and named what was best in me. And then when I committed to the order and was ordained, committing myself to the 3 jewels and to the 10 precepts, Amoghavamsa gave me a new name, completely different name, Bodhinaga. And I love the name. I still love the name, and it just something completely different to identify with and aspire towards. Just naming what's best in me and giving somebody that new name, very, very powerful. Very, very, well, I recommend it. I recommend ordination and receiving that Dharma name that you can aspire towards and live by. Remember what's best in you and try and aim for that. Try and aspire to live by that. So yeah, we can be magicians for each other. We can name what's best in each other and help to bring that out. and give ourselves, just encourage the positive precepts. We've got the destruction of stopping the negative precepts, but there's also the magic of the positive precepts of the creative elements that are open-ended. We can draw that out of each other to give new forms, new, more beautiful forms to our energy, to our emotions. Okay, so I think I want to just end by exploring just one last symbol of Padmasambhava, which is a skull cup. So I've got a skull cup here. And when Amoghadvaisa, maybe about 3 years ago, he said to me, I think, Bodhinaga, you need a symbol of office for being Mitra Convener in Sheffield. You need to have something that symbolises, that you can, kind of ritual symbol of office of being the Mitra Convener. And I meditated on it, and almost straight away what came to mind was a skull cup. And so I thought, okay, I need to get a skull cup. So I Googled skull cups, and it became clear, you can't buy a skull cup. people don't sell skull cups. Well, not in the UK anyway. But there's a friend of mine who's recently become ordained, who travels to Nepal regularly and brings artifacts back and sells them. And I asked him, I said, well, can you get a skull cup? And he just looked at me a bit strangely and said, no, I don't think you can. I don't think you're allowed to bring skulls into the UK. But then maybe a few weeks later, I got this phone call, and it was, again, I'd been meditating, and what had come to mind had been the skull cup and Padmasambhava holding the skull cup. And he contacted me and said, well, were you serious about this? And I said, I was, yeah. And he said, well, I found somebody who was selling skull cups in I can't remember where he was, somewhere in the Himalayas. And what do you want? I said, well, I don't really know. I just choose the one that is seems to be the right one. And the one he chose is the most expensive one, which I had to work out once he got back with the Buddhist Centre and kind of negotiate with them. But it just seemed like I had to say yes, because it seems such an important thing to follow through when you get a message like that. And then I needed to follow through with that. And maybe this is something I ought to have talked about earlier, is that the depths will communicate to you all kinds of different ways. Sometimes it'll be dreams, sometimes it'll be in meditation with these powerful symbols, and pay attention if there's a message like that. But for me, when I try to understand, well, why is it that this is a symbol for me as Mitra Convener, is that for me it's a symbol of transformation. This is what Padmasambhava represents. It's transformation, spiritual death and spiritual rebirth. So he's surrounded by skulls. He's associated with meditating in cremation grounds, and we're going to have a whole weekend on that next summer, Padmasambhava in the cremation grounds. But he's the places of death, spiritual death, and he's holding a human skull filled with red nectar. So for me, this is a very powerful symbol of spiritual death and rebirth, of transformation. And this is what, as Mitra Convener, I'm inviting the Mitras to take part in. I'm inviting them to take part in a feast of delight, but a feast of transformation, to kind of drink from this skull cup, to drink the shunyata nectar in this skull cup. I don't tell them that, and I don't have the skull cup when people become Mitras or when I talk to them. But for me, symbolically, people are being invited to take part in this magical feast of transformation, of the death of their old identities, their old views about themselves, their old habits, for that to be destroyed, and rebirth, something very positive and beautiful and creative to be reborn. And for me, it's symbolised by a Padmasambhava holding a skull cup in his left hand, filled with this nectar of shunyata, and drinking from it. So, that's my invitation to you for this week and for your Dharma life, is to, are we up for that challenge? Are we up for the transformation? And are we up to really serve the three jewels and to be transformed? Are we up for encountering the demons, whatever they might be for you, to becoming get into relationship with them, to find a new expression for them, for that energy? And I do recommend it. It might sound, some of the things I've said might sound daunting, but I wouldn't change any of it. It's kind of, what else would you do with your life other than doing this? So that's my challenge to end with. Thank you.